Hello again, Jean-François. We have this habit of seeing each other every year, once a year, and I always have a little, let's say, a little joke, but important joke to ask you. Do you actually, we have a short, very short fireside chat together. Do you actually agree to say all the truth and only the truth?
Only my truth.
Only your truth. Exactly. So let's start with a couple of questions for you. We actually heard last year, you told us that the peak of energy crisis was behind us. So what are your views now, and probably considering the actual hot context that we have?
Well, obviously it's quite difficult today to have a clear view of what's going on after the attack on Israel. What we have looked at is over the last, well, since World War II, if you look at all the similar, there is no similarity events, but clearly all these kind of terrorist attack, all these events, it's usually not a long-lasting event. We are usually back to the pre-existing trend after a while. Having said that, you still have some escalation possible, potential with the, we are talking about the Middle East, where 1/3 of oil producers are located. So obviously there are lots of potential weaponization of energy again, back to the 70s in a way. So it's kind of possible. The reading of all this is probably another stone into the world organizing itself into blocks. We see many geopolitical consequences to that, more maybe than that. So back to your question, I think the pre-existing trend, which was one of a kind of not normalization, but still, if we compare to last year, I think it's fair to say that if you look at gas prices, yes, they are up. They are probably it's a risk-off event, obviously, but if you look beyond these things and beyond probably some technical stuff, the gas prices has been divided by 10. Oil prices are going to stay around $80, $90 a barrel for probably the rest of time because we have this monetization, in fact, by oil producers. As long as they can produce oil and there are some consumer of oil, that's probably the name of the game. So, if I may, I think this global trend towards a kind of new normality for commodity prices is still on in our scenario.
So 2023 has been the year of inflation and rising interest rates. Where do we stand now, and what is the trend?
Well, I think what is at stake today, we mentioned it during the introduction, is that we are in a world where we need to invest massively. Especially we're talking about infrastructure today. Mohamed was saying this. We need to invest probably in terms of numbers. We need to triple the capacity, or the renewable capacity in the next decade only, to triple that. So it probably means that you need to invest 2.5 times more in the next decade in renewable energy. If you take electrical grid, for instance, in the next 20 years, you need to invest as much as the whole existing electrical grid worldwide. So for Europe, it's probably close to 80 billion a year. So what I'm trying to say here is that you have massive investment needs in infrastructure. Infrastructure will be the name of the game on that. At a time when you see central banks like never before hiking rates. We're talking about 450 basis points in 18 months by the ECB. That's never seen before by the ECB. That's the sharpest interest rate cycle, hike cycle by the ECB on its history. Same in the US. You have seen something not seen since the 70s by the Federal Reserve. So what we have seen is a massive shock by central banks because there was this unique inflation spike worldwide. In 2022, the inflation worldwide was 9.2%. It's still going to be close to 6% in 2023 and probably 4.5% in 2024 again. So it's a massive shock, but like I said, this is a shock which is slowly but surely going into a new normal. Again, inflation has been divided by 3 in the US compared to the peak. In Europe, we were at 10.7% last year, at the very same period. In October last year, we were at 10.7% inflation. We are at 4.3. So we see that inflation is going down and down and down. Again, depending on what's going on with oil prices, but clearly central banks are saying that they're going to look beyond that probably. So what I'm trying to say is that we have seen a massive shock in tightening financial conditions by central banks worldwide. What is ahead of us is probably the end of that. That's the end of the interest rate cycle by the central banks. Probably as we speak, ECB is already done. There is some question about the Federal Reserve, but we think it's done as well. So next move by the Fed, next move by the Bank of England, next move by ECB is probably going to be a rate cut. So this is a massive change compared to the last 18 months. Next year, we look at 80 major central banks, 90% of all these central banks are going to cut rates sometimes during 2024. So this is a massive game changer. Rates and financial conditions are going to change. So this is something probably of utmost importance when we're talking about these massive investment needs we were just mentioning before.
In terms of the words energy transition, what is, according to you, the most striking factor today?
Well, I think the world is moving and is moving fast, in fact. We see that with electrical vehicles, we see that with by many aspects. All over the world, there is not any single, I was about to say country, probably not, but not a single continent, not a single block. Now we have to think of that. Is accelerating massively into that. So what is striking me is that, well, two things. Maybe the planet is hot like never before. In July, the planet was 1.7 degrees up in terms of temperature worldwide for the planet. That's the hottest on record over the last 125,000 years. So this is massive what's going on. And we see all these consequences all over the world with events, dramatic events all over the world. But we see this kind of acceleration of the state of mind has changed massively. So what is striking me is the following. We see, talk about China. Last year I was saying, think of that. China is installing solar panel in 2022, as much solar panels than the whole stock of solar panel in the US. In 2023, China is installing 3 times more solar panels than in 2022. So we have this massive acceleration toward renewable energy. We're talking about coal, we're talking about nuclear in China a lot. They're opening a record number of coal factories in China. But the truth is, 95% of new electrical capacity in China are renewable. So what is striking me is that the move toward renewable energy is accelerating like mad. Solar panels, I was mentioning that, is probably one of the winners. I was having this discussion just during the lunch with a hydrogen producer which are in the room. I think that will be one of the name of the game as well. What is striking is that it's not just one energy, it's a mix of energy, and it's the move has started and it's massively accelerating, which is kind of reassuring compared to what I just said regarding the planet. And the above temperature, it's 8 degrees above normal temperature in Paris today. That's not 1.5, that's not 2%, 2 degrees.
That's right.
We are way above that, and probably the planet is already 1.5 degrees above its pre-industrial, so this is not good news.
Well, one last question, but not least, obviously. How do you see global growth? Wide subject.
A very wide subject, but again, I'm back to my point toward this regionalization. I don't know if it's a regionalization per se, but clearly this big structural trend of the end of the globalization as we knew it. It's a deglobalization story for me, which is striking on every aspect. On every day, we see that that the friendshoring is probably the name of the game to the resiliency of added value chains. We see that is clearly going on. So what does it mean? Is it that the world is closing in? It's more block stories. And we see that the world trade is decelerating fast. And you see a lot of illustration of that. The investment from US to China has been divided by 2 in the last decade. The investment from abroad in China over the second quarter is down by 87%. So people are more investing into alternatives to China because of trade war, because of many aspects. We see this block coming into places, into pieces, and we see this deglobalization. So to answer your question, we are going to see a deceleration of global trade and a deceleration of world GDP. So that's exactly what this morning the IMF is saying as well. We were on average, the world GDP was growing by 3.8% the decade before the COVID. Probably going forward, it will be 2.5, 3%. So this is a deceleration of global trade. We need to think, maybe not regional, but to think as a area of production and consumption which are much more, not local, but much more regional probably.
Well, thank you very much, Jean-François Robin. Thank you for this interesting macroeconomic perspective. Thank you. Great applause to you.